Have you ever wondered why some women, without even trying, awaken an obsessive desire in men? It's not in their looks, their outfits, or their charm. It's in something far more subtle. Something rooted not in what they show, but in what they don't. Real attraction doesn't begin with the eyes, it begins with the mind. Carl Jung said that we are drawn not to people, but to what they reflect within us, projections of our unconscious, and that is exactly where the chase begins. Not on a date, not in a glance, but in the echo of something unresolved that suddenly feels alive. A woman who triggers a man's projection isn't chasing, convincing, or pleasing. She simply is. And in her being there's something undefined, something his psyche wants to grasp, but can't. That mystery, that inability to label or control us, the ignition switch of desire. It makes him reach. It makes him chase. Men don't fall in love with bodies. They fall into a state of wonder, of not knowing, of needing to figure you out. That's what they truly chase. When you walk with inner calm, when your energy doesn't scream, "Pick me," but whispers, "You'll have to earn me," you don't attract attention, you awaken curiosity. And curiosity is the lifeblood of pursuit. The truth most never tell you is this: attraction has more to do with how you make him feel about himself when he's with you. If he feels challenged, inspired, slightly unsettled, insecure, even that's when he starts chasing. Not because he's being manipulated, but because something ancient inside him awakens. A quest, a fire, a hunger. And that fire isn't lit by appearance or effort. It's lit by depth, restraint, and resonance. The feminine energy that captivates is not loud. It's not desperate. It doesn't perform. It observes. It holds. And in doing so, it creates a gap. And in that gap, he projects, he wonders, he wants. The moment you realize that being slightly unknowable is your power, the chase shifts. It stops being something you wish for and becomes something you command. The real chase doesn't start with physical attraction. It starts the moment he realizes that you see right through him and yet still don't offer yourself too easily. That's not a trick, that's power, and that is the beginning of everything. Let's be brutally honest, men are hunters, yes, but they're also pattern seekers. And once the pattern becomes predictable, once the mystery unravels too fast, something inside them switches off. Not because they're cruel, not because they've changed, but because their primal code no longer feels activated. You see, what most women misunderstand is this: a man doesn't stop chasing because he stopped liking you. He stops chasing because he started feeling safe. And for him, safety isn't passion, it's sleep. Carl Jung spoke about opposites in tension, the dance of animus and anima, of chaos and order. A man chases not what he understands, but what destabilizes him just enough to awaken his deeper instincts. This is the cruel paradox. The more certain he feels of you, the less his unconscious feels stirred. And that's when it begins, the slow fade, the pulling away, the excuses. It's not always conscious. Often he doesn't even know why his calls slow down, why his eyes wander. But you do, because you gave too much too soon. You made yourself too available, not in time or attention, but in certainty. You became the open book when what he craved was the riddle. Men are magnetized by tension, not conflict, but emotional polarity. When he has to work for your attention, when he senses that he might not be enough, his desire amplifies. Not because he enjoys pain, but because the uncertainty makes him feel alive. But here's the truth no one dares to say. Most women chase chasing. They want to be pursued, yes, but they fear the silence that makes pursuit possible. They over-explain, they give more. They close the tension too fast. And just like that, the spell breaks. The art is not in keeping a man, the art is in keeping yourself just beyond reach, not out of games, but out of self-respect. Because if he doesn't feel he could lose you, he'll never feel the need to keep you. It's not your job to make him feel secure. It's your job to remain rooted in your worth, especially when he tries to test it. The moment you stop proving, explaining, or reassuring and start observing his efforts instead of initiating yours, something shifts. He feels it, that pull, that edge. That sense that maybe he hasn't yet won you. And that, for a man, is the exact spark that turns silence into obsession and distance into desire. There's a strange kind of gravity in a woman who doesn't rush to be reached. She doesn't ignore, she doesn't chase, simply isn't immediately available. And that subtle distance doesn't repel men, it pulls them in. Because where there is mystery, there is projection. And Carl Jung knew this well. The animath inner feminine within every man yearns for depth, for emotional resonance, for something he cannot possess but deeply wants to understand. When you become that space still, present, but not graspable, you trigger not rejection, but pursuit. Unavailability doesn't mean absence. It means selective presence. It's when your time feels earned, not expected. When your attention is not offered like a free sample, but like a rare wine poured only for those who know how to savor it. The modern world has confused connection with constant access. But the more accessible you are, the less value is perceived, not because you're any less worthy, but because he hasn't had to work to discover your worth. And in the absence of effort, there is no attachment. A man may enjoy what's easy, but he adores what's rare. It's in those moments when you don't answer right away, when you're not the first to text, when you choose yourself over constant responsiveness, that his insecurity wakes up, quietly, unconsciously. He wonders, why isn't she available? Who has her attention? What does she value more than me? And that wondering, that slight disruption in his emotional certainty's not manipulation, it's reflection. It's his own need for validation surfacing, his anima trying to merge with an energy it feels drawn to but can't fully reach. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about being hard to forget. A woman who holds space for herself, who isn't afraid of silence or absence, becomes unforgettable. Because she stands where most crumble, on the threshold between connection and sovereignty. And a man feels that, not with logic but with instinct. He feels like he has something to prove. And when a man feels that, when he senses he might not have you all the way, he comes closer, stronger, deeper. Not because you pulled away to hurt him, but because you stood still long enough for him to realize what he could lose. And in that tension, the chase begins again. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with words, laughter, noise, anything to avoid the stillness that reveals too much. But the woman who understands the power of silence never rushes. She knows that silence isn't absence, it's tension, it's a mirror, it's a force. Carl Jung said that what we don't make conscious will rule us from the shadows. And nothing summons a man's shadow like the quiet presence of a woman who does not fill in the gaps for him. When you sit in silence, not awkwardly but confidently, something shifts in him. He begins to listen not just to you, but to himself. He starts to wonder, what is she thinking? Is she happy with me? Did I say something wrong? And in that wondering, insecurity takes root. Not the kind that breaks him down, but the kind that wakes him up. Because in your silence, he sees the edges of his own unworthiness. He starts to question if he's doing enough, if he matters enough, if he has your full attention, or if he still needs to earn it. Silence isn't a punishment, it's a canvas. And the more you speak only when it matters, the more your words begin to matter. You become a woman of weight, of gravity. A woman whose pauses carry more seduction than another's flattery. Because in the absence of noise, there's room for impact, and impact is what lingers. Most women try to win a man with stories, compliments, declarations. But a woman who sits in quiet confidence doesn't need to convince, lets him notice, and he does. Oh, he does. The masculine energy craves feedback, response, affirmation. When it doesn't get it instantly, it searches. And in that searching, the chase begins. You're not playing a game. You're simply letting him experience the space he needs to feel desire again. The space where he reaches, where he leans in, where he tries to fill the gap not with words, but with effort. And effort, for a man, is everything. So next time you feel the urge to explain, to reply, to make him feel secure, pause. Let the silence hold the weight. Let it speak for you. Because silence, when anchored in self-worth, is not emptiness. It is seduction in its purest, most potent form. There's a kind of woman who doesn't need to prove anything. She's calm, she's kind, but there's a stillness in her, a sort of quiet knowing that doesn't reach for validation or approval. And it's precisely that emotional detachment, not coldness, but calm self-containment that leaves men intrigued, confused, and utterly captivated. She's not unavailable, she's just not dependent. And that unsettles a man in the best way. You see, most men are used to women trying to impress, overgive, over-explain. The energy is clear, choose me. But when a woman's energy says, I've already chosen myself, something breaks open in him, his pride stirs, his instincts wake. Carl Jung taught that the animath feminine within the male psyche is both a muse and a mirror. When she appears embodied in a woman who doesn't emotionally chase, she becomes a mystery. And mystery is what men crave more than beauty, more than status, because mystery demands attention. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to remain grounded, even when someone else pulls away, disappoints you, or acts unpredictably. And that energy, that quiet refusal to be destabilized, becomes magnetic. He wonders, why isn't she reacting? Why does she seem fine without me? And suddenly, he feels the urge to win back something he isn't sure he ever fully had. Most women believe that emotional investment is a sign of sincerity, and it can be. But overinvestment often comes from fear. The fear of losing, the fear of being forgotten. But a woman who's emotionally detached doesn't operate from fear. She's not trying to keep his attention. She's watching to see if he's capable of deserving it. And that shift from chasing to witnessing reverses the entire dynamic. You don't attract a man by proving your worth. You attract him by living in it. When your mood doesn't depend on his behavior, when your peace isn't shaken by his silence, you become a mirror to his own instability. And he feels that deeply, not because you're doing something to him, but because you've stopped doing what everyone else does. You've made your presence a privilege. And now, without words, you've whispered the one thing that makes a man chase. If you want to keep me, you'll have to earn me. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop reacting and start reflecting, not in words but in energy. You become a mirror. And Carl Jung warned us, the mirror is never comfortable. When you reflect someone's behavior without emotion, without accusation, without drama, you hold up their shadow. You make them face the parts of themselves they would rather ignore. And for a man, that confrontation is both disturbing and magnetic. Let's say he pulls away. Normally, you'd reach out, ask what's wrong, try to close the gap. But instead, you match his energy. You don't chase. You don't punish. You mirror. He sends one-word replies. You respond in kind. He goes silent. You go still. And what happens in that silence is powerful. He starts to feel his own distance, his own coldness, his own avoidance, and suddenly he's uncomfortable no because of you, but because of himself. The shadow, Jung said, is everything we reject or deny in ourselves. And when a woman reflects rather than reacts, she becomes the gateway through which a man meets his shadow. You don't have to explain it to him. You don't have to spell it out. Your non-reaction says it all. It says, I see what you're doing, and I'm not playing into it. That response or lack of it does something no lecture ever could. It creates an internal tension, a cognitive dissonance that he can't shake off. And that's when something miraculous happens. He re-engages, not because you begged, not because you convinced him, but because you let him see his own reflection, and he didn't like what he saw. It's easy to get caught in emotional tug-of-wars, to escalate, to explain, to perform. But the true power lies in stillness, in being so rooted in your own worth that someone else's chaos cannot pull you off center. The mirror doesn't accuse, it simply reflects. And in that reflection, the other is forced to look deeper, to take responsibility, to change or lose you. And that choice isn't yours to make. It's his. Your only task is to keep the mirror clean, free from projections, expectations, emotional residue. Because when a man sees himself clearly in your silence, in your calm mirroring, he either runs from the discomfort or rises into it. And if he rises, it's not because you begged him to. It's because your stillness made him realize that he was losing someone who sees him fully but will never lower herself to chase the parts of him that refuse to grow. There's something quietly disarming about a woman who doesn't explain herself. She speaks, she moves, she decides, and that's it. No follow-up, no disclaimer. No need to justify her words, her choices, or her silence. And for many men, that confidence isn't just attractive, it's destabilizing. Because we're not used to it. We're used to seeking out the cracks, the insecurities, the emotional footnotes women often feel obliged to provide. But when there are none, a strange thing happens inside us. We start to feel inadequate, and curious, and deeply drawn in. You see, men are trained to read emotional cues. We instinctively measure how much control we have not through domination, but through subtle cues of reassurance. A woman who over-explains gives away her center. She signals uncertainty, but the woman who simply lets her decisions stand, who doesn't fill silence with validation, who says no without a speech and yes without conditions, she becomes an enigma. Not because she's playing hard to get, but because she's not trying to be gotten. Carl Jung often spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole in oneself. A woman who no longer needs external agreement to validate her internal truth has stepped into that wholeness. And for a man, standing in front of that kind of woman is like standing before a mirror that doesn't reflect him back. There's no hook, no emotional handout, no obvious way to earn her approval. And that lack of access, that quiet refusal to perform, ignites something primal. Confidence without explanation is rare, and it's misunderstood. It's not arrogance, it's sovereignty. It's the energy of someone who has nothing to prove because she already knows who she is. And in that presence, a man doesn't feel invited, he feels challenged. Not to dominate, but to rise. To become worthy of standing next to someone who doesn't bend to be understood. If you want to ignite his obsession, don't convince him of your worth. Simply own it, fully, wordlessly. Let your no be a sentence. Let your boundaries be non-negotiable. Because the moment you stop softening yourself for the comfort of others, you start vibrating at a frequency that only the emotionally mature can hear. And that silence, that lack of explanation, it echoes in him longer than any compliment ever could. There's a reason mystery is irresistible, and it has nothing to do with playing games. It's about essence, depth, the unseen layers that refuse to be packaged or explained away. Carl Jung called it the archetype of the mysterious feminine energy, so vast, so unknowable, that it dismantles every rational defense a man tries to hold. You see, the masculine thrives in logic, clarity, control. But when he meets a woman who embodies the unknown, who feels more like a riddle than a roadmap, doesn't retreat, he chases. Mystery isn't about withholding affection or creating artificial distance. It's about allowing yourself to be seen but not fully decoded. It's knowing when to speak and when to leave a sentence unfinished. It's revealing parts of your soul while guarding the rest like sacred terrain. Because when a man feels he has figured you out too quickly, the thrill is over. But when he senses there are depths in you that even time can't touch, he keeps coming back not to possess you, but to understand what he never can. This is where many women unknowingly lose their power. They overshare, overexpose, hoping that transparency will breed intimacy. But intimacy isn't born from volume. It's born from presence and the courage to remain undefined. The mysterious woman doesn't hide who she is. She just doesn't need to broadcast every detail. She lets her energy speak louder than her words. And in doing so, she becomes a trigger for the masculine psyche, a living puzzle he feels compelled to solve, even if it means unraveling himself in the process. And that's where desire lives. Not in what is given, but in what is withheld with grace. The mystery makes him question his own power. It disrupts his assumptions. It shatters his sense of control. And in that chaos, the chase begins. Because chasing is not about acquisition, it's about revelation. It's about the man learning something about himself through the echo of a woman who never tries to be fully understood. So stop offering your soul on the first page. Stop fearing that your mystery makes you hard to love. The truth is, your mystery is the fire. It's the storm. It's the silence that pulls him closer than any words ever could. And in that depth unclaimed, unapologetic you become unforgettable. There's a subtle power in a woman who doesn't lower her standards just to be chosen. A quiet authority that speaks before she says a word. When she walks into a room, it's not her beauty that strikes, it's her energy. An energy that says, you don't get access to me just because you want it. You have to deserve it. And that, more than anything, makes a man question himself. Carl Jung wrote that the things we are drawn to often awaken our deepest unconscious conflicts. And for a man, encountering a woman with high standards doesn't just impress him, it unsettles him. Not because she demands too much, but because she reflects what he's not yet sure he can offer. Her boundaries become mirrors. Her values become silent questions. Are you consistent? Are you emotionally present? Can you meet me where I stand, not where I'm willing to stoop? Men notice standards especially when they're not spoken, but lived. You don't have to announce them. You just hold them. And suddenly, what he once gave others freely, his time, his words, his presence, becomes effortful around you, because he senses that you're not impressed by the superficial, that what once worked won't work here, and that internal shift, that emotional friction, is the root of his desire to rise. When you show that your time isn't a given, that your heart is not a playground, that your presence is sacred not because you're cold, but because you're conscious, you plant a seed in his mind. Am I enough for this woman? And whether he says it or not, that question lingers. It drives him. It challenges him. It makes him chase, not just you, but a version of himself that's worthy of standing beside you. Let the world call you demanding. Let them say you're too much, because those words usually come from those who benefit from women being small. But when your standards are rooted in self-worth, not fear, you don't intimidate men, you activate them. The wrong ones fall away, the right ones rise. And in that filter, you find the only thing that matters, not attention, but alignment. There's something disorienting about a woman who doesn't behave the way he thought she would. He sends a flirty message, you don't reply right away. He gives a compliment, you don't melt. He leans in and you lean back, just enough to make him notice. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to interrupt the rhythm he's grown comfortable in. Because disruption, when done with intention, creates space, and in that space, he starts to feel again. You see, most men are used to predictable responses. Flattery leads to validation. Attention leads to more attention. He initiates, and she follows. It's a pattern, a loop. But when a woman breaks that loop, when she pauses, when she doesn't rush to reciprocate, when she chooses stillness over stimulation, something inside him jolts awake. Carl Jung would say, the unconscious is stirred most when its patterns are broken. And that's exactly what your unexpected restraint does. It shocks him out of autopilot. He's been conditioned to believe that interest equals access. But when you don't give that access freely, when you don't play the game he's rehearsed so many times before, you don't confuse him, you challenge him. And that challenge is intoxicating. Because suddenly, he's not in control. The script he's used to no longer works. And now, he's not coasting, he's chasing. Breaking the pattern doesn't mean being distant or unkind. It means being aware. Aware that not every compliment deserves a compliment back. That not every message requires a reply. That your attention is not a reflex, it's a choice. And when a man feels your awareness, when he sees that you're not seeking him, but choosing yourself, he feels off balance. And that imbalance creates pursuit. Because in every man, whether he admits it or not, there is a hunger for the unknown, for the woman who doesn't behave like the rest, who doesn't need him, but who draws him anyway. The one who disrupts the rhythm, not by shouting louder, but by moving differently. So break the pattern. Let him feel the silence. Let him reach. Let him wonder what makes you different. Because once the pattern is broken, the chase begins not out of habit, but out of desire. And that's the only chase that ever lasts. A woman who knows she can leave at any time radiates a kind of power that cannot be faked. It's not about threatening to walk away, it's about never needing to stay somewhere that doesn't nourish her. And that knowing, that quiet possibility that she could leave, is what makes a man lean in, not out of fear but because her independence reminds him she is not his possession, she is a choice. And that changes everything. Carl Jung said that the ego thrives on control, but the soul is drawn to freedom. And when a man senses that your soul cannot be caged, that your love is not rooted in dependency, but in sovereignty, he feels something he wasn't expecting, vulnerability, not yours. Because now he knows he's not your center, you are. And unless he offers something of depth, of substance, of true presence, he could lose you. And that possibility, that threat of loss, it awakens him. Most men are not afraid of being rejected, they're afraid of being irrelevant. And when you move through life with your own rhythm, your own joy, your own light without needing his permission to shine, he starts to realize that he's not holding you there. You are. By choice. And that recognition plants the seed of obsession. Because now, every moment you stay feels like a gift, not a guarantee. Rooted independence doesn't mean detachment. It means your world doesn't collapse when someone walks out. It means you have roots deeper than any relationship roots in your own values, your own path, your own wholeness. And that foundation is what makes you unforgettable. He may meet women who stay because they need him, but the woman who stays because she wants him, she lives in his mind long after the moment ends. Let him feel subtly that your life would still be full without him, that your peace would still flow, your joy would still rise, not to scare him but to awaken him. Because when a man senses that he could lose you, not to someone else, but to yourself, he either disappears or he steps up. And the ones who are meant for you, they don't retreat in the face of your independence, they rise to meet it. There's a psychological pattern so potent, so addictive, that it's been studied in labs, tested in relationships, and lived in heartbreak. Intermittent reinforcement. The idea that when someone gives us just enough warmth to feel hopeful, but not enough to feel certain, we don't lose interest, we become obsessed. And when used with integrity, this dynamic can turn attraction into pursuit. Not by manipulation, but by rhythm, by knowing when to lean in and when to pull back. A woman who gives everything too quickly may be adored at first, but soon, her energy becomes expected, predictable, taken for granted. But the woman who offers genuine warmth, sincere presence, and then pulls away just enough to let the absence be felt, she becomes unforgettable. Because she's not always available, she's alive. And her presence feels earned, not owed. Carl Jung spoke about the dance between consciousness and the unconscious. When a man receives consistent, predictable feedback, he stays in the conscious realm safe, logical, unmoved. But when she shifts, when one day her energy is soft and glowing, and the next she's distant, focused, centered on her own world, he falls out of logic and into instinct. And in that instinct he chases. Because now he doesn't know if he still has her. And that not knowing creates fire. This doesn't mean playing games. It means being true to your rhythm. You're not here to babysit his insecurities or train his attention span. You're here to express your light when you feel it, not when he expects it. And when you retreat, when you give him space to wonder, to feel the weight of your silence, you activate his curiosity. Did I lose her? Was she just being polite? Is she slipping away? That storm of inner questions, that quiet insecurity, is not cruelty, it's engagement. Because now, he's not trying to win you over out of confidence, he's trying because he's unsure. And that uncertainty, when paired with occasional warmth, becomes irresistible. Just like a song you can't quite predict, it lingers. So lean in, let him feel your energy, then pull back. Not to punish, but to realign. Let your silence breathe, let your absence echo. Because when a man is used to being the center, the woman who moves like a tide appearing, then receding, becomes the wave he cannot stop chasing. No man likes to admit it, But deep down, every man wants to feel like he's winning something others desire. It's not arrogance, it's instinct. Carl Jung might say it's the ego seeking validation through superiority, through the belief that it stands out, and nothing awakens this faster than social proof. When he senses sentiently, subtly, that he's not the only one intrigued by you, he doesn't relax, he sharpens. Because now he's not just pursuing you, he's defending his position in your orbit. But the secret isn't in flaunting admirers. It's in letting him feel, without forcing it, that others see your value too. Maybe it's a casual mention of a conversation with someone interesting, a story about being asked out, a subtle offhand comment that reminds him, you are not unnoticed, you are seen. And suddenly, the dynamic changes. Because now, he's not simply choosing you. He's being asked, silently, can you match this energy? Can you keep up? This isn't manipulation, it's context. Because when a woman makes a man feel like he has no competition, he relaxes, sometimes too much. He delays, he drifts. But when he senses without jealousy games or false stories that others want what he's still unsure how to keep, his insecurity stirs. And that stir is powerful. Because now, he doesn't just want you, he feels the urgency to deserve you. And it's not about turning him into a performer. It's about awakening his inner drive to step forward with intention, not entitlement. You don't need to compare. You don't need to gloat. You simply exist in your own glow. You remain unclaimed. And the more he sees that you could be anywhere but are still choosing to be here, the more he feels the quiet pressure of your value. Because the truth is, men don't want what's easy, they want what feels worth it. And when he knows others see your light, but that you're still holding your flame for someone who matches your fire, he starts to burn a little hotter, not because you asked him to, but because you let him feel what he might lose. In a world where attention is given too easily and emotional intimacy is poured out without measure, the woman who moves with discernment becomes rare, magnetic, untouchable. She doesn't give access to her emotional world as a default. She makes it clear without saying a word that connection with her is a privilege, not a prize at the bottom of every text thread. And for a man, that realization doesn't deter him, it drives him. Carl Jung taught us that what is unconscious seeks expression, and often, a man's unconscious desire to earn something meaningful is what awakens when he meets a woman who doesn't overgive. She listens, but doesn't overshare. She receives, but doesn't rush to reciprocate. She loves deeply, but doesn't do so freely. Only the ones who show up with depth, with effort, consistency, and integrity are welcomed deeper into her world. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to reach emotionally for anyone who hasn't proven they can hold space for your fullness. You don't reward breadcrumbs with banquets. You don't chase silence with softness. You observe. You wait. You require that a man meet you in the place where energy is matched, not begged for. And when he shows up, truly shows up, you let him feel the warmth, the softness, the fire of your presence. You don't hold back out of fear, but you don't pour into voids either. That balance, that sacred discernment is what makes your energy unforgettable. Because he knows on some deep level that you're not loving out of loneliness. You're loving from fullness. And that kind of love demands a higher version of him. You see, the more a man feels that your affection is connected to truth, not convenience, the more he starts to rise. Not perform, rise. He reflects. He steps up. He adjusts. Because now, it's not about catching your attention, it's about keeping your presence. And he knows that won't come from charm or effort for a day. It will come from showing up, day after day, with emotional presence that matches yours. So reward what is real, not what is loud, not what is fast. Let your soul respond to substance, and let everything else fade into silence, because your energy is sacred, and only the man who recognizes that will get to feel it fully. She doesn't chase, she doesn't convince, she doesn't reach for what doesn't reach back, not because she's bitter or guarded, but because she has become something far more powerful than desired. She has become whole, the feminine enigma, the woman who no longer moves to be seen but simply moves. and wherever she goes, the energy shifts not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. Carl Jung called this the individuated woman, the one who has traveled inward, faced the shadow, stood naked in her own emotional truth, and emerged sovereign, unshaken, free. She doesn't seek love to complete her, seeks love to expand what is already complete, and because of that, she becomes the gravitational pull men never forget. She doesn't have to pursue, she is pursued, not because of a tactic, but because of her state of being. Everything you've read until now, subtle unavailability, calm detachment, silence, high standards, self-possession, isn't about strategy, it's about alignment. The moment you stop performing for love and start embodying your worth, the entire dynamic shifts. Men no longer sense you as someone to win over, they sense you as someone they must rise to meet. And in that gap, the chase begins. The feminine enigma doesn't explain her silence. She doesn't soften her no to make it more digestible. She doesn't confuse being kind with being compliant. Her mystery isn't a costume, it's her truth. Her layered, nuanced, deeply felt truth. She is the woman who lets absence speak, who lets her boundaries breathe, who walks away when something no longer honors her. And she does it not with drama but with dignity. She holds her energy like a chalice precious, not because it's rare, but because it's self-sourced. And that kind of woman? She awakens men, she unravels them. She brings them face to face with their own depth or their inability to meet it. She is not always understood, but she is always felt. And in that feeling, the chase is born not to conquer her, but to stand beside her. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. The moment you become the woman who no longer needs love to feel full, you become the woman love can no longer resist. Not because you waited, but because you became the final archetype, the mirror, the muse, the feminine enigma. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.